The Frog Princess. Far over the snowy plains, the frozen rivers, and the forest filled with wolves and magic, there once lived a king who had 3 sons. All 3 were handsome young men, but the bravest and the best was the youngest, Prince Ivan. One day the king called his sons to him. "I am getting old," he said, "and I want grandchildren before I die." Then he told his sons to take his bow and arrow into the meadow and shoot an arrow into the air. "Wherever this arrow lands, you must look for your bride," said the king. This was a strange way to choose a bride, but no one ever argued with the king in case the world came to an end. So the princes went into the meadow with their bows. The eldest brother turned to the east and shot his arrow. The second brother aimed his arrow to the west, but Prince Ivan drew back his bow with all his strength and shot his arrow straight in front of him. Then he went to see where their arrows landed. The eldest son found his arrow in a courtyard belonging to a noble lord who had a pretty daughter. The second brother had managed to shoot his arrow right through the window of a rich merchant's daughter. But though poor Prince Ivan hunted high and low, he couldn't find his arrow anywhere. For 2 days he searched the woods and fields. On the 3rd day his boots began to sink into boggy ground. The prince had wandered into a swamp without noticing, and to his horror, in the middle of this swamp, holding an arrow in her mouth, was a frog. She croaked, "Marry me, Prince Ivan, or you'll never leave this swamp alive." What could the prince do? He didn't want to marry a frog, but he didn't want to die in a slimy swamp either. Pale with horror, Prince Ivan promised the frog he would marry her. Then he picked her up and she guided him safely home. When his brothers saw Prince Ivan coming through the palace gates with his little frog bride, they laughed until their sides hurt, and their brides sniggered tee-hee-hee behind their hands. "I must be the unhappiest prince who ever lived," thought Prince Ivan. He was just going to beg the frog to release him from his promise when he noticed the wise expression in the froggy eyes. "My brothers may laugh if they like," he said to himself, "but I gave my word to marry this frog, and if it is my destiny, good shall come of it." So the king's 3 sons were married, the eldest to the daughter of a lord, the second to a rich man's daughter, and the third, Prince Ivan, to a frog. After their weddings, the 3 princes left the palace and found homes of their own. The prince and the frog were surprisingly happy, and the prince always treated his bride kindly. Then one day the king called his sons to him again, and he frowned in the way the sons knew only too well. "I want to see how neatly these new brides of yours can sew," he said. "Take this linen and ask your wives to make a shirt for me by tomorrow morning." Since no one argued with the king for fear of the world ending, the 2 elder sons hurried home with the linen. Their wives busily began to cut and stitch, and as they worked they laughed till they cried to think of Prince Ivan's froggy bride trying to sew with her little froggy hands. When Prince Ivan went home, he didn't breathe a word about his father's test. But the frogs saw how unhappy he was and asked what was wrong. "He wants you to make a shirt," the prince said. "It isn't fair. You're just a frog." "Brrr," croaked the frog. "Go to bed and rest, and maybe you'll be wiser tomorrow." As soon as the prince fell asleep, she asked her servant to cut the linen into small pieces and leave her. Then she took the pieces in her mouth, hopped over to the window, flung them open, and croaked, "Winds, winds, fly with these pieces and sew me a shirt for the king." The words were hardly out of her mouth when a shirt, perfectly stitched and finished, came flying back into the room. When the frog gave him the shirt the next day, Prince Ivan couldn't believe it. He put it under his coat and took it to his father's palace. His brothers were there already, dying to show off their wives' needlework. The eldest brother couldn't wait to show his shirt to the king. But the king took one glance before tossing it in the corner. "It'll do for one of the servants, I suppose," he said. Then the king took the shirt that the merchant's daughter had stitched. He frowned. I might wear it in the bathhouse or on a foggy day." But when he saw the shirt Prince Ivan offered him, the king was astonished. Not a single seam could be seen in it, and the king gave orders that this beautiful shirt should be worn only on feast days. Ivan's brothers muttered, "She's not a frog. That ugly little wife of his is a witch." Well, it wasn't long before the king decided on a second test. So he called his sons to him, and he drummed his fingers, rat-a-tat-tat, on his chair, in the way his sons knew only too well. "Each of your brides will bake me a loaf of bread by tomorrow morning," he said. "Then we will see which of my sons has married the cleverest wife." Again, no one argued with him, in case the world came to an end. And again, when he reached home, Prince Ivan didn't want to tell the frog what had happened, but she made him tell her. "It's not fair to ask you to bake bread," said Prince Ivan. "You're a frog." "Brrr," croaked the frog. "Go to bed and rest now. Maybe you'll be wiser in the morning." As soon as he fell asleep, the frog asked her servant to make a paste of flour and water, and to put it in the cold oven. Then she hopped over to the oven door and said, "Bread, bread, baker's dough, bake yourself as white as snow." The oven door flew open, and there was the loaf of bread, cooked to a turn, white and soft on the inside, and crusty golden brown outside. Not only that, it was beautifully decorated with the design of a city, showing domes and towers and gateways. Now the other princesses were wildly jealous because the frog's shirt had been better than theirs. So they sent a little kitchen maid to spy on the frog to see how she baked her loaf. When the girl decided that described what she had seen and heard, they too mixed flour and water, poured the paste into cold ovens, and repeated the spell hopefully. But the paste just dribbled over the ovens and made a horrible mess. The angry princesses had to start over again and make bread dough with yeast and hot water instead of magic. They were in such bad tempers that one loaf turned out burned and the other was still raw. Next morning, the 3 sons took their loaves to the king. The king threw the first one to the floor. "Give it to the beggars at the gate," he said rudely, then tasted the second loaf. "It might be good enough for my hounds," he sneered. Then Prince Ivan unwrapped his bread, and the room filled with magical baking smells. The loaf was as perfect as something from a fairy tale. It was so delicious that when the king tasted it, he said it must be kept for a feast. But before long, the king had a third test for the new brides. Again he sent for his sons, and he paced up and down the great hall in a way they knew only too well. "Everyone knows that all princesses must be able to weave in silver and gold," he said. "Take this silk and turn this gold and silver thread and bring me back 3 carpets in the morning." Well, no one had ever argued with the king before, and no one argued now. But when Prince Ivan reached home, the frog saw how upset he was and made him tell her his father's latest test. "Go to bed and rest now," she croaked, "and maybe you'll be wiser in the morning." As soon as he fell asleep, she asked her servant to cut the silk and silver and gold thread into small pieces. Then, as before, she threw the pieces out the window. "Winds, winds," she cried, "fly with these pieces and make me a carpet." The words were hardly out of her mouth before the embroidered carpet came flying through the window. Now, once again, the jealous princesses had sent the little kitchen maid to spy on the frog. When she described what she'd seen, they were sure the spell would work for them this time. So they cut all their precious materials into pieces, hurled them out the window, and waited. But no matter how long they waited, no carpets came flying magically through their windows. So the princesses had to send for more materials, and they sat up all night long weaving angrily. When the king saw the carpets the angry princesses had made, he shook his head. "Put this one in the stable," he said to his eldest son. "It might do as a horse blanket." To his second son he said, "I suppose the servants could wipe their feet on it." When Prince Ivan unrolled his carpet, the king was so astonished he couldn't think of anything to say. It was the most beautiful pattern anyone had ever seen. At last the king said this carpet should be put in his treasury and brought out only on special days. "Now, my dear children," said the king, all smiles for once, "since your wives have done everything I ask, bring them here tomorrow night, and we will eat, drink, dance, and be merry." The two older brothers grinned. "Ivan's frog wife may know a few magic tricks," they whispered, "but when it comes right down to it, she's just a frog. Everyone will laugh till their buttons fly off when they see her." Prince Ivan went home in despair. "You sewed the shirt, you baked the bread, you wove the carpet," he said to his frog bride, "and I'm grateful. But in the end you're a frog, and my brothers' wives are beautiful women. How can I take you to the feast?" "Brrr," croaked the frog. "Go to bed and rest now, and maybe you'll be wiser tomorrow." The next day the frog said mysterious, "You must trust me, my dear. Go to the palace and I will follow later. When you hear horses' hooves, say, 'Here comes my poor little frog in her box,' and you will see what you will see." At her words, Prince Ivan's heart felt wonderfully light, and his worries fell away. For strange as it may seem, he had come to love the frog. "Neither my father nor my brothers were ever as kind as you, my little frog bride," he said softly. "Why should I care what they think of me?" And he set off for the palace. As soon as the prince was out of sight, the frog hopped to the window and called, "Winds, winds, bring me a carriage with 6 white horses." 6 white horses trotted up, drawing a golden carriage behind them. With a little shiver of magic, the frog threw off her skin, and in her place stood a princess so dazzlingly lovely that for a moment the moon hid herself behind a cloud. Meanwhile, the guests were arriving at the palace. When Ivan's older brothers saw Ivan by himself, they sneered. "Why didn't you bring your lovely bride? Haven't you got an old dishcloth to dress her in?" But Prince Ivan ignored them. Just then everyone heard the sound of trotting hooves and rumbling wheels. "Don't worry about that," he said quickly. "It's only my poor little frog in her box." The whole court rushed outside to see this strange sight. But a golden coach drew up, pulled by 6 milk-white horses. A beautiful princess stepped out and smiled at her astonished husband. "My name is Valissa the Wise," she said. "A wicked magician turned me into a frog, but your love for me broke the spell." Then they danced past the prince's brothers and their jealous brides. They danced past the king, who was already frowning slightly, as if he might be thinking of a new test. The couple went on dancing right out of the palace door and into the starry winter's night, where they danced on no one knows. But you can be sure that the prince and his wise bride lived happily ever after. The end.